Okay, welcome everyone to the work session for the City of Poquoson, and this is Monday, February 25th, and we're here to talk about Virginia Stormwater Permit Program Development. And Ellen, I believe you have the subject, so
Okay.
go forward, unless you want to say a few words.
You got it.
Okay. I was here in January to talk about all of the various stormwater programs that are going on. You may remember this spreadsheet showing all the various things we have to do. We're only talking about one component of this. What we're talking about tonight is the state stormwater permit for construction activities. For the past few years, the state has issued a stormwater permit to anybody who's disturbing more than 2,500 square feet in the Chesapeake Bay area or more than an acre in the rest of the state, if they're disturbing that much land. And the new stormwater regulations that were passed a year or two ago and are going into, or in the process of going into effect, are transferring the responsibility for the day-to-day operation of this permit program from the state to local governments. The idea behind it is that you have a one-stop shop. Right now, we issue land disturbance permits. At the same time, we'll do the legwork for the stormwater permit. So the first question is, what does this mean for Poquoson? We operate a new permit program. Right now, we have land disturbance building permits. When they show up at the front counter, they're also going to have to do the work to get the stormwater permit from us instead of going to the state after they finish with the City of Poquoson. This will increase labor costs. Obviously, if you're administering a new program, you need to spend more time doing it. Many cities and counties are going to end up hiring new members. In the western part of the state, where they haven't been administering a Bay program, they're going to be hiring a lot new staff members because right now they aren't issuing any of those sort of permits. On April 1st, we have to submit a preliminary staffing plan to the state to basically show them that we're making progress in developing this program. That staffing plan is supposed to take a first stab at what it's going to take to staff this new permit program and how we're going to pay for it. It's not final. We don't have to have any final decisions at this point. It's just basically showing that we're making adequate progress. What we have done to date, what staff has done is we've met to discuss program requirements. I've been attending the regional meetings and tracking the development of the new construction permit requirements. So we've briefed the staff and we've sat around and discussed what it would mean to how we operate on a day-to-day basis for development review. Staff members are going to get back to me with the typical hours they spend now and what they anticipate they're going to have to spend for a single-family lot development or small development in the near future. And then we're going to take that and use the fiscal year 12 development rates and come up with basically an idea of how much more time we would have spent in fiscal year 12 if this stormwater permit administration had been in place. We're also coming up with a list of questions that over the next few months, as this plan has to be finalized, we know to ask the state and to find, and really to ask ourselves and find out how we're going to administer this. So what sort of new duties are staff members going to have? More record keeping. We're going to help applicants navigate the state's e-permitting site. The state is requiring that all the permit applications for this program be done online on their new enterprise website. It is not an easy website to navigate at first. It's going to be a little bit difficult for people to get used to. So we're probably going to realistically have some staff time helping them walk through the process, and we're also going to have to help people who don't have access to computers. The state stormwater regulations are beefing up the stormwater requirements, so we're going to have more detailed reviews of plans and calculations, especially when we start getting more subdivisions rolling in as the economy improves. We have to do more frequent and more extensive site inspections. And of course, we have to do a new annual report to the state. So, if we were to need to hire staff, or for those cities and counties that are hiring staff, What type of workers are we most likely to need? What if development improves and we find that we're overwhelmed by this new requirement? We're going to need more people to review plans and calculations, most likely an engineer or two. Inspectors. Right now we have one who does most of our site inspection. Administrative support to keep the records, to help the public with the e-permitting site, and also to help do the reports to the state. I'm not saying right now we need more staff, but if we were to see a substantial increase in development, at that point we'd need more staff. So do we need it? It depends on what happens with development. If we look at the fiscal year 12 numbers, they were pretty dismal. The economy is very uncertain right now. At this point, I feel very uncomfortable predicting what development's going to be like starting in fiscal year 15, which is when this program goes into effect, July 1st, 2014. What we're going to do for this preliminary staffing plan is use last year's numbers. But toward next fall, as we get into later fall, we're going to have to start pulling out crystal balls and coming up with some ideas for what's going to happen in fiscal year 14 and 15, or 15. And that's when we'll revisit staffing levels at that time. So how can you pay for this sort of program? How do you pay for more staff? The state is allowing local governments to pay fees or to charge a fee for stormwater. I think 28% goes to the state for its administrative costs. The other 72% of their fee structure can stay local to help offset some of the costs of the program. I did a preliminary calculation using the fiscal year 12 development rates, and it obviously will not pay even the direct labor cost of administering the stormwater program, but it could help. You can charge general development fees. Some localities are looking at kind of rolling everything into one development fee. Some are looking at using general funds and not raising their development fees because they want to encourage economic development. If we charge the state fee, we have to look at how we do our accounting. If we charge a stormwater fee, we have to be able to explain how that fee is spent to state or EPA auditors. So we need to go ahead and divide out time. We're probably talking about timesheets here, and have a different accounting system. So we can say this is how much of the city inspector's time went to stormwater, and this is how much he spent on the rest of his duties. That's obviously going to be a little bit more complicated for smaller localities like Poquoson, where your staff tends to multitask more than, say, Virginia Beach, where there's a stormwater department. Also, what happens is if you do charge that fee, you should be aware that that probably gives the EPA and the state a little bit more leeway to come in and comment on your staffing levels. That seems to be a trend that we're seeing. The Arlington draft permit for their stormwater program actually requires Arlington County to submit their budget and their staffing levels for stormwater to the EPA and the state every year. That's not a final permit, but that's written in the current draft. Like I said, local communities seem to be divided on how they're going to pay for the stormwater program. Some are looking at charging the stormwater fee. Others are looking at rolling it into it. So, council decision points. This will probably occur next fall when we've been able to watch development for a while and have a better idea of what's going on. Staff is going to come to you. We're going to present the latest development trends and ask for direction on what to use in the final staffing plan. Basically, we'll share what's coming out of our crystal ball predictions and ask you for your input. We're going to come up, using that information, we're going to come up with staffing levels for fiscal year 15, and we're going to talk about financing options. Questions? You're allowed to subcontract it out. You're also allowed to work with other groups like other counties, or you would be able to work with a regional group to do some of the work. The advantage of that is obviously you get an economy of scale and you can share some of the costs. The disadvantage is you may have people who may be less familiar with the city doing the reviews.
Well, the second one matter, I guess, watching the General Assembly can't
Right.
roll in local thoughts into what's approved by the state. That's, I believe, what it looks like it's going to pass this year.
Well, it did, what that bill did pass, but it was modified quite a bit, so we can get into that. Basically, we still have, the local governments still have the latitude to do more than the minimum required, or to require more than the minimum required, but if somebody protests it, you have to provide justification to the state. My concern more is more with flooding. If you've got these people looking at water quality, which is primarily where the focus is here, you may have people who are unfamiliar with Poquoson's conditions, flooding concerns, looking at the flooding. Now, you can manage that by having your city staff really get involved with the person reviewing it and kind of doing a double check. I can tell you in the past, we've had consultants do plan reviews, and we've had some issues hanging on from those. But there are ways about it if we do choose to use a consultant, or if we use a regional group or something to do this.
This is something, Randy, I know you go every once in a while. Have you ever heard HRPDC talking about any kind of regionalism on this?
No, I haven't.
I haven't either. So
No, I think that would,
start the conversation way in advance.
I would be concerned about telling our citizens that they need to drive to Chesapeake to file a permit.
Right.
No, I was thinking more like, we bring it up through the PDC, but there's a peninsula arm of that because our concerns are different than the Norfolk arm of that. But somehow I think taking this on within the city of Poquoson for the amount of property that we have developable, we've got one major tract. I'm kind of wondering if we are better off to subcontract this and put some very good stipulations on it. I'd hate to see us add more staff when we could review the work of other consultants.
well, if the development levels stay at the fiscal year 12 level, you may not do that. You may have a consultant for, if something comes up once in a blue moon, and you may also be able to work in agreement with York County or Hampton or one of the other neighbors instead of going through the entire region too. So,
I actually see I don't like more regulation. There's no question about this is more regulation, but I also don't want to continue to take on regulation every time we're position staff. Like, frankly, this won't pay for it. You made that point. And that we share some common ground with York County in particular, or something to negotiate with them for a common consultant between us. I don't know, but we've got some time to think about it, but I just don't want to focus on one thing would be that we would add. That's one option. Add staff.
right, and I should have,
One option is to subcontract it out to a reputable person who specializes in this. And third option would be to continue to push back on the state, which we continue to do.
I think the city inspection may be, that may be someplace too where you may want a little bit more redundancy in that position and have someone else. The other thing is you could have a part-time person who is certified. We were kicking around some ideas for cross-training of employees and that sort of thing.
I like that.
So, anyway.
Yeah, I think a lot depends on, like you say, what the economy does and how much
Right.
development goes on in the city.
Right.
If you got one big development coming along in the next 10 years, you hire somebody temporarily to do the inspections, the review. But now these fees in this model ordinance,
Right.
those are that's carved in stone, that's the max fee?
Those are the maximum fees. You can charge less than that if you so desire, as long as you at least charge the minimum state fee, which is that 28%.
And they keep referring to the administrator. Have you gotten to the point where, if, let's say we don't subcontract it out, would that be you?
I need to read a little bit more with the stormwater regs. I'm not sure if it has to be the manager level or if it can be someone else. Karen is certified in stormwater administration, but we've never had a program before. Sometimes you need to have, I think, an administrative officer do it, but sometimes they'll,
Designate somebody.
yeah, I haven't finished
Yeah, well,
reading.
in looking at some of these stipulations, I mean, if we had a lot of development, that'd put a lot of time on that person designated as the administrator. I mean, you got 15 days to tell them if the first submission
Right.
is correct,
Well,
and then you only have a short period of time if it isn't correct to get them to get it correct.
Well, what you do is the 15 days is a completeness review. So you're looking at it, in the past, we've had people who, it wasn't stormwater related, but they were required to submit a landscaping plan immediately with their site plan review, or their site plan submittal, and they didn't submit the landscaping plan. So the 15 days is sort of checking off the box. Yes, you provided me calculations. Yes, you showed all your stormwater structures, or no, you didn't, take it back and give it to me when the calculations are attached. And then you have 60 days, I think, to complete
Right.
the entire review, including that 15-day period. Or it's 60 days from when you tell them it's complete. So you don't have to go through all the technical stuff. You know, we're usually looking for things like, what are the contours telling us? Are they proposing to do something that's going to end up draining on the neighbors? So it takes a while to go lot by lot, for example, in a large subdivision. So you obviously couldn't do that in 15
Right.
days.
What fees only did you say while we're combining that the land disturbance fee, the stormwater permit fee?
Yeah, the land disturbance fee for an individual lot, for all intents and purposes, is $150. If you have a really large land disturbance and you're disturbing more than a minimum threshold, there's additional fees involved.
They're
And
combined with those fees.
no, that's separate from the stormwater fee.
Karen, on page 9, I noticed that it says there's an optional provision for a performance bond. Middle of the page 9, number D.
Right.
It's almost impossible for the average person to get a performance bond. I mean, if you consider that as optional. A big contractor, I mean, W.M. Jordan can get a performance bond, but I'll guarantee you that Wayne Moore probably couldn't if I wanted to do work at a smaller scale. So I think you'll take a careful look at any requirement for a performance bond. And then over on page 10, number 7, it looks like to me the only way that you could provide to comply with that is you're going to have an engineer do that work. I mean, there's no way an average citizen can do those calculations and verify compliance and that kind of thing. So what it means is that even in a smaller project now, they're almost going to have an engineer so they can qualify.
Right, it's going to get more difficult to do basic development. And what you need is you need an engineer. There are certain surveyors that have a certification. And there are also some exceptions to the rules, so, right, just in general, the Virginia stormwater requirements are going to make it a lot more difficult to do any development.
Well, this is what we agreed when we talked to this is the same discussion we agreed to do with that correct? About the coming regulations. So what is it that this average citizen can do today to get in front of this?
This program goes into effect when you pass the ordinance, no later than July 1st, 2014. There are grandfathering clauses before that, and the requirements are a little bit less before that. So the best thing they can do is if they know they want to do something on their property, if they want to do a 2-lot subdivision, or they're thinking about doing a major modification to their house or building a new house, is to go and talk to a surveyor around here and let them look at their specific property. But keep in mind that July 1st, 2014 is the absolute last date. It depends on when the local ordinance is adopted. And I'm not sure if we can the city adopt an ordinance that says effective July 1st, 2014? I would imagine so. So the other thing to be aware is anything that's grandfathered in may cause us to do more for retrofitting. But in order to help our citizens out, you know, that's
Alan,
a trade-off.
does construction of a single residence or constitute development according to this?
Yes, but the single-family residence requirements may not be as, are not as onerous as the, doing a major subdivision, obviously. But you still may find your surveyor doing a couple calculations and that sort of thing, and putting in a, you know, an enhanced swale or something in the backyard. Or a new
It'll add
landscaping bed.
another $1,000 engineering cost to the basic, just for a basic, simple plan. It'll cost additional $1,000 over what it's costing
Or
now.
at least. At least.
At least, yeah, I mean, that's just the engineer saying, I'm gonna spend a couple, 3 hours
That's right.
doing the calculations and in effect putting the stamp on it, being responsible for it.
Well, I think we're all aware that, you know, it's unusual timing when your economy is really in the pits as it is for the whole United States right now, and you're trying to dig your way out, that you put into effect more barriers to dig yourself out. So that's why I wanted the general citizenship to understand what it is that they can do to be in front of this instead of behind it. So I think that's important, and I appreciate the thing, and you know, I'm all about making sure that we're communicating that message, you know, that, and I think we have been very clear with landowners that in 2014 the rules will change. Just be aware of that as a citizen, a landowner, or somebody who wants to do something. Get in front of this. That's what we're saying.
You referred a couple of times to some properties being grandfathered under this.
Right.
What will that, excuse me, what will that mean to those folks, that they have fewer regulations or none of the regulations, or?
If someone were to submit a plan today, it would be reviewed and approved and commented on and approved using the current stormwater requirements, which are the ones on the books now. And those are different from what will start when we pass the new ordinance, which adopts the new stormwater requirements. And those are they're going to be tougher to meet.
And for a person or landowner to do that, they would not have to have the development in, but the development would have to be in and approved, and possibly the permits issued.
To be perfectly honest, the rules get very complicated for various types of developments. And the best thing to do is to talk to that surveyor and also get in and talk to the community development department and look at your particular site and figure it out.
Okay.
Because if it's a really big development, you've got to have it completed by June 30th, 2019, or else it reverts back.
Well,
Whatever isn't completed is going to fall under these new regulations.
right. But what I'm saying is,
So it's not a total grandfather.
agree. But that's still 5 years beyond
Right.
the issue. So if you want to stand a chance, get in and start talking. So. Okay.
All right.
Anything else, council? Questions? Okay. We'll move to regular meeting.